Welcome to the top M&A entrepreneurs. I have a guest today is Gary A. Puddles. Gary has been involved in over 75 acquisitions. He runs a company called AnswerNet. President and host of Plantastic, TPV.com, telemarketing.com, appointmentsettingpros.com, winner of Smart CEO Best Run Companies, Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year. AnswerNet was also on the 21st spot on the Inc. 500. So he also teaches at Wharton School of Business. He's been at Forbes, Wall Street Journal. It's pretty cool. So welcome, Gary.
It's great to be here, John. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. So I got to go back all the way back how you started. And I watched a couple of your other podcast interviews where you just started. I got to tell you, where you said, you were trying to buy these telecommunications company. I had no money, no job. I had a wife, 2 kids, and a mortgage. And if I didn't get this job, if I didn't buy this company by this certain time, I had to get a job. So I'd love to go back and talk to that, very first start. And he goes, why did you want to buy a company and run a company? I mean, what was in you that did that?
So that's a great question, John. The reason I wanted to buy and run a company is because I had the most fun in my career prior to starting my company when I was running a franchise of the Muzak system down in Washington, D.C. And I had a boss who was the owner of this franchise. And it was interesting. I started during law school as the collections manager and law clerk. And after I left to get a real job, their local counsel passed away. And I started representing them, and I hadn't even passed the bar yet. So I'm working as a law clerk, bringing work into this small little law firm. Then I get a job in private practice, and I'm doing private practice. And the president of the company passes away, and the VP, who I become really close with, basically comes to me, and I'll tell you, he takes me out to lunch at the University Club in Washington. Starts complaining that the men can't swim nude anymore, and I just remember thinking, I never want to swim nude with you.
Where is this? You're like, where is this going?
Yeah. So, but he made me an offer, and he slid a piece of paper across the table from me, and that was the beginning of my business and entrepreneurial journey. 3 weeks after I got to this company, he had gotten ill, and and I found myself running a business pretty much day to day. He was my mentor. He was my friend. But, he'd come into the office and hook himself up to dialysis and do dialysis right in the office. So so I did that. And then, when we sold the company, so I had done acquisitions with him in that business. And I had done acquisitions as a young attorney, and now I had gotten involved in a pioneer preference winner. So after I left, I wound up in a company that had won a pioneer preference from the FCC. We built the first PCS, which is a wireless system, digital wireless system. Then I got involved in a real estate company as the general counsel. Again, acquisitions and acquiring leases and doing transactions was my whole life. I moved to Philadelphia for a job, and I loved what I did, but I just didn't fit in the company. They were good, smart people. It just wasn't the right fit for me. So I often say, did I quit or did I get fired on that day? I'll just say I collected unemployment, and we'll move on from there. But there I was in January of '98 in a town that I didn't know a lot of people. And I didn't want to go back to work for somebody. I realized that if I was going to work for somebody, I wanted to work for myself. So I didn't want to start from scratch, because while I had some savings, I had a wife, 2 kids, and a mortgage, as you pointed out. And I realized that I was going to be happy as driving my own business. And so what I did was I wrote down all the things.
Let me ask you about that. Yes, what did you see in the businesses that you were working for as a W-2 that you just go, man, I could do this better, or I just don't like answering to somebody, or what was it?
So the culture of the firm that I was at before was, we were bringing people on. that we could afford, pushing them to the highest level that we could push them, and then replacing them with someone better as the firm did better. That was sort of the philosophy.
Yeah.
But for me, it wasn't about that. It was about, I've always believed, I love telecommunications and communications. I love data. I love people management, and I like business to business services. I never wanted to be around somebody who was, I didn't ever want to be around people who were at the worst of their life. And I'll never forget, I was looking at everything. So I'm looking at all different kinds of businesses. And at one point I looked at a preschool franchise, and my ex-wife started laughing. Like, she didn't just laugh, giggle, haha. She started belly laughing, saying there was no way that I was going to be happy running a business with a bunch of children running around. And she was absolutely right. So I needed to find something that had recurring revenue. So one of the themes in my career was recurring revenue.
Recurring revenue.
The second theme was technology. The call center and answering service businesses that I got into, like the Muzak business I got into before, and the telecommunity and the wireless system, the wireless system company that I was with, was ultimately bought by Sprint. It was part of Sprint, now part of T-Mobile, right? So what I've been involved in up to that point in my whole career was not disruptive changes in traditional businesses, but I was really involved in helping traditional businesses change their model to fit new realities. So going back to Muzak, during my Muzak days, we had private radio. We only had 2 channels. We had 1 channel of music, then 2. Well, then we had 5, and now they had, then the internet made it easier and easier. So we had to change the model we were working from. Didn't change the business. We were still providing sound systems, doing sound contracting work, things like that. But we now had to change the model, and the economic model changed. Same thing with wireless. I'll never forget being in McLean, Virginia, and somebody saying, we have 2 cell phone carriers, and they work fine. And they got on their phone to talk to their spouse, and their call dropped. And it was, I couldn't have written or scripted it any better. So the fact was that ubiquitous coverage was really critical at that time. And we always likened it to, imagine trying to build the highway system in America without the right of condemnation, right? That's what we were faced with in trying to build these wireless networks. And again, we weren't turning the whole world upside down, but we were changing the face of wireless. I remember sitting at a Howard County, Maryland town council meeting, where I had my laptop and I was going at 9,600 baud wirelessly, which is, for guys of our maturity, that's when you would hear your AOL sound, okay? And I was sitting, and I was sitting in this meeting, and people thought it was the coolest thing. Now I could maybe pull up 1 page every 10 minutes, but it was still the coolest thing. And the same thing happened in when I came here into this business. I bought a company that wasn't even, where the agent stations weren't even attached to that fad. What was it called? Oh yeah, the internet. Yeah. So So the whole idea was, I often say that I'm like the Slumdog Millionaire of call centers, because my wireless experience, my Muzak and data experience, my legal experience, all of those added up, so that when I got into the call center business, I understood it at a visceral level.
That you're putting like a pieces of puzzle together, and you say, I know which way the industry is trending, possibly.
Exactly. Yeah. So for example, they used to be mainframe type computer systems, and everybody was attached to this mainframe. Well,
the dummies, I remember those. Yeah.
The dummy terminals, right?
Yeah.
So as we started putting agents on the internet, all of a sudden, like, there was freedealerlocator.com. So all of a sudden, I had free dealer locator software that I could go to, and I could leverage the internet And so what we ultimately figured out, because by then, at that time, originally, everything was premise based. Now, as we connected these, as we acquired businesses and connected them to the internet, I worked with a guy. In fact, ultimately, I worked with a guy who, I don't know if you may know his name, Jamie Siminoff, the founder of Ring. So of Ring.com.
Yeah. Shaq invested in him.
Yeah. Well, Shaq was actually a sponsor as well. And we connected them with National Night Out here in Bala Cynwyd, Pennsylvania. And that's how Shaq and Ring got involved with the National Night Out organization. So it's really some really cool stories. But, Jamie was the president of a telecom company and had built some routing technology so I could route calls for a single customer to multiple call centers. And I used the internet to collect all of the data. And it made my little telephone answering services capable of doing so much more work. So we started in the traditional telephone answering service. And it wasn't about what I saw that I could do to make it bigger or better. I understood, I like to say I understood Gazinta. What I understood was if this goes into that and that goes out of this, I can make almost anything talk together.
I thought you were saying the Jewish term, and I get like, no, I get it. Goes into that.
Yeah, this goes into that. And by the way, same thing. We operate today. What we do is we live in a world we call the business of any communication path, voice, text, email, chat, WhatsApp, any of those, Messenger, connected to any business process software. Accounting, CRM, data collection, whatever system, anytime, anywhere, on any device. So I've always had sort of a bigger vision. The other thing I learned early in my career as I was thinking about acquiring businesses is that every business can be managed at a high level, focusing on 6 numbers.
6 numbers.
6 numbers. Now, and the call center business is probably 5, but 4 to 6 numbers is all any entrepreneur needs to focus on. Now, the devil's in the detail, of course, but what I mean by that is when you're looking at any business to acquire, you want to understand the big drivers of that business. Now, I was very lucky. I during my journey to buy my first company in the space, I met a man whose company I would later buy 23 years later.
Was that Bill?
No, Bill was the first guy who believed in me.
Yeah.
But this was another guy named Tony, and Tony handed me an analysis of his business and 3 other companies in the space done by his daughter's Columbia MBA class. So it gave me all of the driving metrics, all of the understandings of the business. So when I ultimately did meet Bill, who by the way was a friend of Tony's, when I ultimately did meet Bill, who was one of the sharpest numbers guys I've ever met in my life. I mean, it's pretty public that he and I had a pretty nasty falling out at the end, and that's fine. I wouldn't be where I am if it weren't for him, if I'm being honest. But this guy could look at a financial statement, and it spoke to him like a contract speaks to me.
I am in the same feeling that, like, if the Warren Buffett says, hey, send me your financials, and there's a story there.
Right.
Tell a story. Where is this going? Yeah.
So many people, and this is one of the many things I learned. So many people don't understand that numbers tell the story.
Yeah.
They tell a story. And one of the challenges that entrepreneurs often have is finance people think if I put all the numbers on the piece of paper, I don't necessarily have to order them in a way that anybody's going to understand, because I understand them, so everybody's going to understand them. Well, that's just not the case. So to your point, it was the 4 numbers in the call center business are people, right? People represent the largest expense. So people, which would be benefits and salary and all of those pieces. Technology costs, right? How much are you spending for internet, for telephony, for the technology? Because in the call center space, your cost of goods sold are people time and system time. That's what you are selling. Okay. And then, so those are your two biggest, then your sales and marketing expense and your facility expense. Well, during pandemic, it's been a very interesting time because facilities have sort of gone away. We still have some, but in many cases, facilities have gone away, but wages have gone way up.
Yeah.
And that has been a stressor. So when I'm looking at a business to buy, I'm looking at a number of things, and again, very simple. Starts with a multiple of cash flow. So you're going to start with a general multiple of cash flow or EBITDA.
Yeah,
And
there's nothing. If somebody came to you with a communications company, you'd say, "Look, here's the comps. This is what I'm going to pay."
yeah,
And there's no above it, no below it. And it goes, I don't, even if you have some kind of spiffy, software, it doesn't make, yeah.
Well, there are 65,000 call centers in America. 4.5% of the U.S. population work in call centers.
Jesus.
And the average call center is not that 600 or 1,000 seat place, 75 seats.
Yeah.
So if you do the math, 75 times 65,000, you realize very quickly that you're talking about 4.5% of the population. Call centers do all kinds of really cool things.
Yeah, I mean, that's for Verizon or Geico or all of it. Yeah.
Right. Now, technology is here, and that is a big thing. But what that's going to do is just drive your percentage of it just drives your EBITDA up or down. And a technology firm's a little different in terms of value. But to your point, as one of the things, again, being who I am, I started out as a collections and bankruptcy lawyer in Maryland. So having been able to get that as a background, doing, buying turnaround service businesses made all the sense in the world. And I'm sure that many of the people in your audience struggle because when they go out to start a business, everybody thinks they have to start from scratch. Well, if you are a parent, or you have, you're not a young person, how many of our friends, John, reach their late 40s and early 50s and find themselves out of their jobs.
That's today. That's even more. Who's employable after 55? Trying to find a job.
Right. Yeah. And so there are hundreds of thousands of businesses for sale. My favorite site is a site called Biz, and this is where I first saw the telephone answering service, was bizbuysell.com, B-I-Z.
Yeah, there's a guy that just bought that. He just bought it. Yeah.
That was really where I started my entrepreneurial journey on that site.
Wow.
That's where I started my entrepreneurial journey back in 98 when I lost that job and I needed to get to my next place. So it's, when we think about that, and, we talked about, in your emails, you talked about, how do you finance it and how do you do that? Well, I was very lucky. I read about this guy, Bill, and I told you about him. But what I ultimately, my first step was I was going to buy them and go out and raise money. Right. That was my plan.
That's what everybody talks. Everybody that pings me on LinkedIn says, "Hey, I need to raise money to buy this." Yeah.
And that was my original plan. And I was very lucky. I met a bunch of people, but the two people who really sort of set me on my way. One was a woman by the name of Liz Lambert, who ultimately, she's been a banker around Philadelphia. I haven't seen her in years, but she had done a big telecommunications deal. So she understood cash flow lending. Okay, because nobody's going to lend. You can't securitize people. In some places they call it slavery. So you can't securitize people. So you have to have a banker who understands service company lending, or what's called airball lending. And she worked for a bank that was run by a guy named Kirk Wyckoff, who's very, very famous in the Philadelphia banking circles. And the non-bank subsidiaries were run by a guy named Steve Hobman, who's now a principal in New Spring Ventures, which is a very well-known firm here in Philadelphia. And for whatever reason, they believed in me. Like they were really behind me. And I had gotten a company under term sheet and we were going to put it into the non-banking subsidiary of the bank. And that was my original plan. Well, when I got into due diligence.
Let me ask you about that. And how much did you want to own of that? I mean, what did it look like on the cap table? You 50, 60, 100%?
So the deal was we were going to go dollar for dollar, and then we were going to carve out a piece of equity for management. And I think we were going to do 20 or 25% for management. And then for the rest of the 75, they would let me put as much of the money up I wanted to, and they were going to put up the rest. That was the plan. So whatever we put up in equity, that was the deal. That
you got to put skin into the game to get that.
Oh yeah. But I was going to put in a little bit, and I would get, I'd get enough equity, and that was still better than no equity, and that was my plan. Well, that plan didn't work out. What's the old saying? Every time you think you have a plan, God sits up there and laughs at you. Well,
yeah, punch to the face.
Yeah. So I'm now months in, as you've talked about. I'm now months in, and I lost my job in January, and my ex-wife and I had an agreement that if I didn't have a company by August 1, I was going to go out and look for a real job.
Did you really mean that when you said that? Yes.
Without question.
Okay.
Look,
because us entrepreneurs have this problem of this addiction. It goes, no, I just do the next one, right? It's the next one, like get at a golf shop or something.
See, but at that point, I wasn't really yet an entrepreneur.
Oh, okay.
Because I had never, the real definition of an entrepreneur is one who takes risk.
Yeah.
Okay? So I had been with a startup, probably the best funded startup in the in American Personal Communications, which was the wireless startup that we ultimately that was ultimately partnered with Sprint. But the reality was I wasn't senior enough. So I ran the Muzak franchise. Muzak franchise I ran was one of the oldest franchises in America. So there wasn't a lot of startups, and while the owner of the franchise let me do some new and interesting things, the reality was that it was the same business that they had been doing since General Squire had founded it in 1929. And most people know the story of the franchisor ultimately went bankrupt, sold to a company called Mood Media, which was a Canadian public company, and then they took it private, and it's been there. And then I went to Sprint, and then I went to the startup rooftop management company in Philadelphia. And again, I was right under the owners. And while I was going to be earning a piece of equity, I wasn't at risk. I took a lower pay, but to be fair, I didn't put my money up and take a real risk the way the founders did,
right?
The way the investors did.
So the leveraged buyout, yeah,
right. This was my real first foray into my own path. And so when we got into due diligence and we couldn't prove the numbers, the bank went looking for an exit. And during the process, I had met that guy, Bill, and I'll fast forward through the whole story, but essentially, when I went to tell the seller of the first business that I wasn't going to buy his business, I then went to Bill's and thinking I was applying for a job. So to your point, no, I was a pragmatist. I
got bills to pay. Yeah,
I had a mortgage. I had 2 children. I had an ex-wife who had been quite patient up to that period, and when I went to him, he made me an offer I couldn't refuse. He offered to sell me half of his company, and he allowed me to put basically my life as the story goes. So what happens is he offers me an opportunity to buy half of one of his companies, but it was late on the day on Thursday. So he said, tomorrow I'll send you financials, come back Saturday and we'll see if we can do a deal. Now, one of this guy's superpowers is the ability to make fast decisions and to to see if you could as well.
How would you get paid, like a salary from the role?
So our deal was everything was equal. Everything was equal. we put up. So what happens is he sets the price. So he sends me the financials on Friday, and I go in, we talk for 2 seconds, and I already had in my brain what the highest price that I would pay. We're in the meeting, 3 minutes, he says the exact highest price. I said, that's a very high price. He goes, that's your cost of admission. And I said, so what was I getting besides just a business? I was getting a mentor, a guy who had already built one of the biggest businesses in that space. I was getting immediate credibility, and I didn't realize it at the time. And by the way, he said, if I'm not happy in 6 months, he'd give me all my money back. Okay, which is highly unusual. And so I said, okay, what, I'm getting that and all this other stuff. And
did you place any value on the mentorship part of it?
Not in dollars and cents.
Yeah.
I knew that the number was high, but I mean, again, at that point, I mean, I was going to go from being a small minority owner I went to a 50% owner.
50%.
I told him I didn't have that kind of money. He said, how much you got? I told him. He said, I'll take that and I'll give you a note for the rest. And the note was personal. So what really was cool is a week later, he walked in. And he was incubating the company. So my corporate office was in Princeton, even though it was an hour drive. And the company I bought was operated out of Allentown, which was an hour drive from my home. So I had a mentor. I had a corporate office separate from the operating office. So I never really had to work in the business. I got to work on the business, which is, as you know, in talking to entrepreneurs who are buying existing businesses, that is such a benefit.
Yeah.
And so fast forward a week later, he comes into my office and he tells me that there's a company in Portland, Oregon, that is also for sale. It was actually bigger than, the company in Allentown was doing $50,000 a month, and the company in Portland was doing 60. And he said,
so did you accept the company that he offered? You said yes.
So what happens is, he said, my other partner had, because he would help entrepreneurs. And this is what the article that introduced me to, he would help entrepreneurs. Well, one of his other entrepreneurial partners didn't have the money to close on a term sheet that they had signed. Something I'm very proud I never did, right? Every term sheet that I have signed, unless there was a problem in due diligence, I've closed on. But this partner of his didn't have the cash. They had run out of cash. So I said, well, give me some time. So I pick up the phone. I call the bank that was going to be my partner. I said, you're never going to believe this. I got into the business a week ago. I have a balance sheet that's completely clean. I have 3 years of operating history. And I have an opportunity to buy another company, but I need $500,000, and the company was doing $600,000. I said, I need $500,000, or I need $600,000. I wanted to fully finance it. So they called me back a few hours later and said, well, we can do $500,000, and you're going to have to come up with 100. So I went back to my partner, Bill, and I said, Bill, okay, this is what they said. And we each I mortgaged my house to put up another $250,000. Remember, I'd already given him my life savings. So I mortgaged my house. He was very well off. This guy was a very successful entrepreneur. I mean, he had hundreds of businesses. He had years of experience. He worked with Bill Levitt from Levittown, Long Island, and Levittown, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I know that.
So my Bill was Bill Levitt's Fix-It CEO. So Bill Levitt had a turnaround situation, and that's where I learned all about turnarounds too, besides my bankruptcy career. Again, the slumdog millionaire of call centers, all of these disparate experiences coming together to give me the experiences I need to do what ultimately I could do. So I mortgaged my house. I get my $250,000 or $300,000, and he writes his check, and we close on that deal less than a month after I did the first deal with him.
And the bank liked the numbers, and it just went through.
The bank was amazing, and we were off to the races. And that's and we did have some sales effort, but 18 months later, we did a turnaround of what was then the largest company in the space. So 18 months after we started, we went from a $4 million run rate to about a $26 million.
Yeah. So now he has you like doubling his efforts, you know?
He has me doubling his efforts, and I have opportunity. Like, I never would have gotten that opportunity if it weren't for him.
Right.
Okay. So now, again, those were the good days. You know, there's an old saying that nothing is really for free. So I mortgaged my house 3 or 4 times over the next few years to buy companies and grow the business. I'll never forget, I was in a pitch meeting with an investor, and he said, "What's your burn rate?" And I looked at him and I said, "What's that?" You know, because I was buying profitable businesses at reasonable prices and running them through the cash flow to pay for the acquisition costs. I had a partner who had there was no check I was ever going to write that he couldn't just go write the check and match me. You know, he had at one point, I know we for unknown reasons, for reasons not relevant, we figured out he was worth well over $100 million during our partnership. So, he had no trouble writing checks that required me to go mortgage my house. But it was a very cool time. And as I said, I mean, even in that first 18 months, we did 7 or 8 acquisitions.
Wow.
And a couple that I didn't want, that didn't fit me, I helped and did for him. So, it's
and he took a part of all your acquisitions too, or?
Well, we were partners until we weren't, right? And then we had a falling out, and and as want to happen, until that point, ultimately we wound up splitting the company. I took half, he took half, and today we're 3 times bigger than we were after the split. So it's been a huge ride. And I know, we talked, this is a M&A entrepreneurs. So in the last year, I did 11 acquisitions in 11 months.
Wow.
It's been the craziest. So let's fast forward to where we are today. What happens is, we're coming out of 1999. We had done a couple of large acquisitions in 17 and 18. And coming into 19, I had to right size the EBITDA and fix the company. And I'm really lucky. The president of my bank, a guy named Tim Abel, knows just when to kick me in the ass, and he did, and he needed to. And so 19 was a year where I focused on executing, really getting the best EBITDA.
You got to start getting stuff at the Furr's cafeteria and putting it on your plate. You've got to start eating it. Yeah.
Right. And you have to eat it correctly. And you have to do all that. So we focused on that in 19, and coming out of 19, last day in 19, I lost my biggest customer, and I was, bummed. Now, the good news is, for most of the business, when I get beyond, we have currently about 10,000 clients. And after the top, say 30, so let's say the top 30 represent probably 40 to 45% of the business. No client represents 15% of 1% of my overall revenue.
Did you fix that? I mean, that's always a challenge with entrepreneurs going, hey, if they ask you, well, I've got this one client represents 75% of my business. Like, dude, that's just too much. The risk assessment on that means you can go to your cash flow burn rate is 0 if he leaves.
Well, it is and it's not. So here's the cool part of where we are as a company today. We've built this model to be a very much variable expense model. So with the ability to go remote, and with the ability to use SaaS products, I can flex and unflex at will.
Oh, this is kind of like Uber. Just like, are you available? Availability rates, yeah.
Right. So it is a really cool model, because all my stuff is in the cloud, right? All my technology is in the cloud. So now we still have physical locations, don't get me wrong, and that's a different model. But, I have the ability to turn on call center seats in hours, not even days or weeks, and hours. So it's a complete flex model now. Now it wasn't back in the day. One point we had over 50 locations. Now, now we have 30 locations, and we just had a meeting yesterday, and the question was, what are we going to do with the real estate?
Right. That's facilities is number 4. Yeah.
Right. And in conversations with my leadership team, that's when you're an old man. Okay. That's when that you are seasoned, because if somebody would have told me I would have gotten everybody home in 2 weeks, and I had a former VP of ops was available just at the time I needed him. Right. And my COO, the woman who's now my COO, who later became my VP of ops, she kept things rolling as he was moving us home. It was really, and we had a great IT organization to make it all happen. And so it's become much more of a variable rate deal. But as we come out of 2019, and we lose this big account, we started laying off in February of 19. And then I don't know if there was this thing called a pandemic that just happened.
Yeah. I actually read something about this, that you did something pretty incredible during the pandemic, work with bankers to save companies by hiring. Tell me that story. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens is we get a call from the state of New York, and the state of New York calls us and says, okay, I need 100 people for this project to schedule coronavirus testing at mobile testing sites. That's how hard it was to get testing, if we remember at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And as I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to staff 100 agents, they then call back and they just push the number up. So I get a phone call from my banker, a woman by the name of Beth Packle, and Beth calls me and she says, listen, how are you doing? And you could tell she'd just gotten the snot kicked out of her for hours as she's calling clients, and they're trying to figure out, how do I change my business model? How do I do what I have to do in order to make my company run? And she told me the story of a client of hers, 90-year-old trophy and awards company, that was, what I didn't know then, was was marketing royalty here in Philadelphia. Inside of this guy's business was the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame. Okay. And the guy knew everybody. Et cetera. But she called me back 10 minutes after, because I told her I needed. She goes, she told me the story, would you consider hiring my friend's employees? And I realized that I needed to onboard a lot of people fast. I said, I'll do one better, because the bank was who they were. I'll hire the company, let the people keep their jobs, benefits, all of that. Uh-huh. And I was able to do that for about 7 other companies that not by my own, I don't mean to brag, but by their statements, we saved their companies. So we were able to save like 7 companies, but this goes into our growth story. So instead of being down 20%, which I was figuring that was what it was going to be in 2020, we wound up doing that deal, and then having another deal with Deloitte. So we created this relationship with Deloitte, and we started doing government work with Deloitte, and they are a wonderful partner. They were just terrific. They were smart, and they were driven, and it was really a wonderful partnership. Well, all of a sudden we're growing. Well, then we come down to the end of the year, and I know, because I'm smart like this. I knew that the pandemic could never last into 2021. That's just silly talk, right, John?
Silly talk.
Right. So
still wearing masks.
Yeah. So, yeah. Right. Good. Yes. So I was going to wear a mask for this podcast, but I figured I couldn't get you sick. So the last 2 weeks of December 2021 and the first 2 weeks of January 2020, 2020 and 2021 was the longest year of my life. All of a sudden, the vaccines were coming. All the states needed needed vaccine scheduling teams, and what was insane became complete insanity. In order to solve all of that, we had grown, so we had grown 30% in 2020, and I'm sitting there trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to manage all of this? Well, we created a entirely new level of management in the company, a director level, if you will, of people in the company, and February and March, our revenue for February and our revenue for March equaled the revenue I had for a year in my original business plan back in 1998. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was pinching myself. I was waiting for somebody to tell me it wasn't mine. I realized that I had never worked for a company as big as the one I was now owning.
Yeah.
So it was, put whatever crazy superlatives you want, but it became obvious really fast that the drug chains, CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid, were doing a much better job of distributing vaccines than the government. So I knew that business was going away.
Who would have thought?
Right. Now, I could tell you that I then planned it all out, and it
just sounds like you were the right place at the right time.
I was in the right place. So all of a sudden I start getting phone calls. People are worried that the administration is changing. They want to get out. In one case, there was a guy who had bought a big company, and he had a division of the company or two that didn't fit. And he asked me if I wanted to buy them. I had a software company vendor of ours who just wanted to retire, so he sold. And we got into a couple new verticals during this period, but we acquired we acquire 8 companies in 8. And now I'm telling people it's almost Thanksgiving. We've done 8 and 8, and because a good entrepreneur is always thinking about the story the numbers tell. See how we're bringing all this way back to the very beginning of this podcast, right? It's all about the numbers and the story that the numbers are telling. So what happens? I say, okay, here's my story. We grew in 2019. We grew in 2020. We went sky high in 21. And then we matched 20. So even though I had COVID work in 20, we were going to, based on where we were, and we did the 8, I'll be fine. That's the story I can tell. So as I'm getting ready, I'm now crazy. Okay. I mean, I have satisfied my current urge to acquire. And what was really cool was we did it all out of the profits from COVID. So we did
out of the cash flow.
Out of the cash flow. We still have no partners. We still have no investors. And the bank had been, super supportive. Well, then I get calls from 2 people who I had spoken to earlier in the year. I had made offers, and the buyers that they had lined up, both of them walked. And would I do the deals? So I did those 2 deals.
Now you're the guy with the gravity.
Now I'm the guy with the gravity. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. So one of the deals, which was the biggest of all 11 deals, I closed in 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
And 3 weeks, we changed the nature of the deal. I had to borrow money from the bank. Everybody was just, any entrepreneur who's going to play the game the way I've been playing it cannot do it alone. My internal team, my bank. And did I mention in the middle of all this that my accountant of 25 years passed away in the middle of all of this growth, and I had to hire a new accounting firm to do my audits and taxes for 2021.
Always a challenge in front of you, isn't there? Unfortunate events, yes, but
right. And so I did those 2 deals. So I was at 10 and 10, and then I got a phone call from somebody I'd spoken to this is the worst thing that can happen. And you sit here as an entrepreneur, and you say, there, but for the grace of God, go I. They'd gotten hacked, and it took down their entire company. Okay. you can protect yourself so much that you can protect yourself, but let's not kid ourselves. If Google can get hacked, if Amazon can get hacked, if Yahoo can get hacked,
everybody could get hacked. If
everybody can get hacked.
LifeLock can get hacked, you can
Right.
get hacked. Yeah.
Exactly. So we were very lucky. But this guy had the same situation. He was trying to rebuild. He thought he had, a partner to rebuild with. It didn't happen. So that was number 11, and we've closed that one. And we closed that one at the end of February, at the last day of February, and that was my 11 by 11. And now we're projecting to beat last year by 5%.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, when I think about my my COO Corey and my whole executive team, I mean, we just you caught me at a great day. So earlier this week we had our first in-person annual meeting in 3 years.
Wow. Yeah.
And for a guy who loves people, which is pretty good, if you're going to be in the call center business, liking people is a really
you gotta like people.
Yeah.
Yes.
And a guy who's a hugger, whew, I'm going to tell you something. It was inspiring, and it was and we've been doing it for 23 years. We did two virtual annual meetings, clearly not the same.
Yeah.
And it brings up all of these other things. The other big difference in the acquisition arena is that of the 11 companies, only 3 or 4 of them had physical locations.
Yeah, that is amazing. Yeah.
Right. So
that number 4 on the back, which is facilities, is not even an expense anymore. Yeah.
In a lot of cases, it's not.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the sort of the story of how we were able to grow for our CAGR over 5 years is 26%.
Yeah, let me ask you about the technology cost, because when you make an acquisition, it could be a different technology. Do you bring it over to yours, what you like, or do you stay with what they're using?
So that's a great question. And when it comes to technology, you try to run, if they own the technology and the cost of maintenance is reasonable, you can keep them on that technology. But almost none of them had technology that they owned anymore. Like where
it's a SaaS app. I mean,
it's a SaaS app, and so if I'm going to have a SaaS app, I might as well use the one I know.
Oh, you just teach people in the new SaaS app, right?
And part of our model has always been, because I came from wireless, part of our model has always been that any technology, we have our own MSP. So all the technologies we use, we offer anyway to our competitors. We've become one of our sweet spots we're the call center's call center.
So you've got the technology to offer to other call centers.
Correct.
Which is nice.
We have a team that supports it 24/7 anyway.
Yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense, because when I'm adding seats in our technology, all I'm doing is adding extra seats into my Amazon cloud or into my Azure cloud. We happen to be on both.
We
don't discriminate between Amazon Web Services and Azure. Okay.
Yeah.
We like them both. We're very inclusive that way.
Did you have that in mind to say, hey, this helps let's say if you were to, I'm looking at an exit and going, look, we've got the software technology that helps our multiple. It's a reoccurring. We love that.
It does, and it does, because it helps me get my software for a little less money. But it was more because we started in the answering service business. I'd gotten to the point where I was bigger than my vendors.
Yeah.
I was bigger than the software vendors I was looking to support me. And I decided that it was best that I didn't have other people who could take me down. I didn't want to have to rely on what I thought was overpriced software. Look, software vendors are very talented, but there's so much software out there that I didn't want to have a situation where I was running the same software as everybody else, because there were certain technological things that I wanted. So the reason I offer it to my competitors is because I believe that, if I'm running it, if I'm running it, I can make money from it. I need to support my 30 locations and 15 remote teams anyway, 24/7. So if I have another 20 or 30 or 50 clients, what does it matter? I'm still running the same team, maybe with a couple more people, but I'm running the same team, and that's why I did it. And that's
Now,
why
is it a white label that you take the software and load it onto Amazon Web Service and they use, or is it connected? Because I've just had a curiosity, is like you offer to competitors, they go, well, what if we upload all of our data about our customers and you have access to it?
Well, I'm one of the biggest honors that I have ever received is an award called the Tom Ryan Integrity Award from one of the call center associations that I'm a member of. And that I think says it all. I mean, the reality is, if in business, we've been very well respected by our peers. A lot of people shared with me when I got into the business and have given to me, including my original partner, right? So I try to give back, and I try to give people the best experience. The other thing I did was I didn't like the way most software companies did business. And so I tried to build a company, meaning we have a stack of tools in our call center offering. You can either take the whole stack, or you can just take any piece of it, and we'll host it for you, or you can host it yourself.
Yeah.
So, I try to give people choices. The other thing I do, which makes everybody nuts, is I post my prices online, because I was not happy buying from software vendors where you're made to feel like you're buying a car or a house.
Call for pricing.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Here's what it costs. You don't want it, you don't want it. No worries.
Yeah.
You want it, you want it. And what's really been interesting is where we have clients, we share the software with them and then handle the overflow when they're not using it. And that's cool too.
Yeah.
So again, it's about that. I learned this because when I partnered with Bill back in the original day, Bill had other companies and other partners. And one of the things that I noticed early on were his other partners would always, quote, offer to bring everybody to the table. Well, I knew I could never bring everybody to the table. I came out of franchising, where each individual owner, and even though Bill wasn't a franchisor, he had a number of partnerships, and each individual owner was independent as heck. He loved strong, independent people. That was his jam. The stronger you were, the more independent you were, the more he liked being involved with you. So that was, I knew that I couldn't bring it to everybody, but if you want what I have, so what I would do is I would go to a vendor and say, okay, this is what I need, and these are the relationships, but I'm not promising you any of them. And then I go to them, this is what I have. You want in, cool.
Yeah.
You don't. But that way I was sort of being nice to him, and by offering what I was uncovering to his peeps. But if they didn't want it, it was all good, because I needed it for myself.
Let me ask you a question. We're running out of time real quick. How do you said you had a falling out with the Bill or the earlier. How do you create, or do you just avoid partnerships altogether? Like, how do you create a Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger partnership? Or you just avoid that kind of?
Well, I don't avoid anything.
You've got a rule for it or something, like I know who you are.
I've done a lot of partnerships. Some have been good, some have been bad. Sometimes I'm the bug and sometimes I'm the windshield. So one thing I would say is there's a reason why investors tend to get out in 5 or 6 years, because in business, people's direction change.
Life happens. Yeah.
Well, and to the point, Bill was 30 years my senior. So, Bill had been doing it for a long time, and his wants and needs and desires changed. Plus, so I often say, um, you know, there's a reason that 5 years, 6 year partnership is a good thing. So every partnership I go into, I offer a way out for partners, if they need it. That's a big part of it.
Yeah.
I've gotten out a lot of good things out of partnerships. So I would not say to you, don't do partnerships. I would say that the agreements that you enter into need to be specific. Like, one of the problems I had is I wrote an agreement with Bill, and it was written by my then lawyer, and she didn't know the legal impact of something, which is fine. And I signed it.
A future event that you would
That
likely occur, but she didn't have the known unknowns. Yeah.
Correct. And so it ultimately was part of the undoing of the partnership. But again, I think I started out before we got on recording. I'm one of the luckiest people on the planet.
Yeah.
Okay?
Thank you for saying that.
And
Yeah.
this entrepreneurial journey has been the most exciting thing I could do. And I could tell you about all the rotten stuff that went on between he and I at the end, but I'd rather say I wouldn't be where I am without him, and I'll be forever grateful. And as I said to you about my friend who owns the trophy company, he's one of the people most that does more is more grateful about things than anybody I know. So I'm going to practice humility as much as I can, for a guy with a big ego. And but I am so appreciative of everything, of my family and of my business colleagues and everything that I have gotten to do. And for fun, I play rock and roll music in bars.
Yeah, I saw that. I did Fun Size and Bucket Band Philly.
That's right. And so check out our Facebook page, our pages. But here's what is not there. So my keyboard player is my chief of staff in Bucket Band. Lead singer is my vice president of sales, and my bass player is also the general manager of the first place I bought in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, you got to create a great network then. And I'm out of time, so Gary, I want to thank you for being on Top M&A Entrepreneurs.
Thank you for having me, John. And it's gonna, I love the podcast, and I look forward to hearing this one and continue good work in helping spur entrepreneurialism.
Thank you so much. Great story.
Take care.
All right, take care.